So, I mean, if you look at the value chain of, let's say, our end device is a mobile phone, there could be that in itself is a platform of sorts, but there are other more obvious platforms like the, Google Play or the app stores. Within those live the Amazon's, Facebook, or any of those things, which you can also separately download if you want, which are platforms themselves. Then there are sellers, buyers, consumers, and other service providers, right? So throughout all of this is the imbalance of information, asymmetric information, and therefore the power that emanates from it is how we see it, right? Um, so at one end, the consumer certainly now, particularly on transaction and selling platforms, has more information than they would have otherwise because they can price compare. So there is increased power, definitely, but in comparison to who? The seller has generally lower entry costs with many of these platforms if you want to sell, but there are entry costs. You can't automatically switch. The platform itself has a lot more information, and this has been theorized well about, the meta information about user behavior, or what kind of products they search for, and so on. The platform owns it. The individual producer does not know that Helani from Sri Lanka is using for pink widgets, right? Until that transaction goes through. So there's a lot of meta information about user behavior, which can be quite separated from the product pricing and confidential product related information, right? So, but even that part of that information doesn't actually flow to other people. So there's a fundamental problem. And this comes out in regulatory responses because, there's evidence about Amazon sort of, driving people out of the market because they have more information about pink widgets than the actual pink information owner, right? Widget owner. So there's huge asymmetries of information. So underlying this are sort of, if you go to economic concepts for the consumer, the power relationship is about switching costs. So if you look at a work platform, I work on Fiverr.com, let's say, doing logos, and we study these people. They can't exactly port their previous work done on the platform to another one. So portability or switching costs becomes a really important concept that we haven't really addressed. That happens across content platforms. So at the operational end, that's about interoperability, but from the consumer end, that's about portability, right? So metadata and portability. So in the regulatory response, I think certainly the American-driven response, the primacy is given to short and medium-term drops in prices and increases in choice, which platforms have brought about, right? And yet the longer term impacts on who is able to enter markets and whether there's a level playing field for somebody who doesn't have the existing network effects and huge venture capital backing that's now required to really provide meaningful competition in a platform, that gets sort of, ignored. So I would say the regulatory response really has to worry about very practical stuff like portability, interoperability, the sharing of metadata. So I'll really differentiate that from product data, but the long-term competitive dynamics. So I think, again, overall, the barriers for using and benefiting and being on platforms really varies by platform, but there's one sort of common theme before from a consumer point of view, and that is you need a mobile phone. So obviously we start with the huge disparity in access, right? So we're talking sort of most of the South Asian countries, perhaps with the exception of Nepal, under 50% of people over the age of 15. I mean, as low as 30, as low as 20 in some countries. The numbers have bumped up due to COVID. Having a feature phone or a smartphone that gives a decent mobile internet experience, having very low quality data connectivity because the networks are loaded, low digital literacy on average. Under 40% of people say they can do anything other than passive browsing. So changing privacy settings, posting information, searching, doing a transaction are beyond the capabilities. All of this comes with huge gender gaps and slightly less but significant urban-rural gaps and income. So the rich, if you are female and rural, you're less likely to be online and so on. So that's the first barrier, right? That's from just a consumption point of view. Then if you are a producer of services, so you want to be a Uber driver, you want to do your logos online and sell them on Upwork.com or whatever, then there's a whole set of other barriers, such as inability to get paid because countries are still blocking. Sri Lanka is a classic example, PayPal. So you have to now have the technical skills to pretend and morph an IP address in Malaysia, open a PayPal account pretending you're a Malaysian person, get paid into that. You can't cash out in Sri Lanka. You can only sort of circulate that money to buy more things that you might need, like mobile phones and so on, and pay for it, but you can't really access the cash. Or you end up paying, 14 up to 30% into intermediaries who help you cash out through various cards. Those are real problems, right? So very low use of credit cards. That's another barrier, both on the ability to receive money and then pay for transactions. So these are quite significant.